Right then, let's actually get this going. I see I've basically got the same audience I had 2 minutes ago, so you don't really need me to say the same thing. But yeah, last talk at the GI Academy stage. We're going to learn about being more producer, so let's give a warm welcome to Louise Roberts from Rare.
Hello. Okay, so welcome to my talk on Sea of Thieves. I don't know how many of you are familiar. We are always encouraging people to be more pirate, but I'm going to do a different take. I'm going to encourage everybody to be more producer. Oh, hang on. Excuse me. Well, I'm not on the screen.
Here he is. Sorry, mate.
1 second. Technical difficulties. Hooray! Okay, so who am I? What qualifies me to talk about this? My name is Louise Roberts. I've been a producer for 7 years. I've also worked in art, outsourcing, and product management. In the image on the right is my pirate skeleton. If you have played Sea of Thieves in the last couple of years, you might have murdered me, so well done you. I've been at Rare for 2.5 years, and I'm currently the person in charge of the Pirate Emporium, which is Sea of Thieves' post-sale monetization store. My experience in game dev is entirely live service based, so I'm going to talk about things through that lens. I am also very much, as like a caveat, I'm very much a people person, so I'm going to be focusing a lot on relationship stuff and soft skill stuff. There are a lot of different ways to approach production, but this is how I tend to do it. So I'm going to divide this talk up into 3 sections. So first, a bit about what a producer even is and what producers do. Second bit on planning and delivery. And third bit on relationships and communication, and then hopefully we'll have some time at the end for questions. So there's a lot of, the divisions are slightly arbitrary because there's things that apply to everything. There's a lot of crossover, but this is just how I've divvied it up. So I'm very grateful to have the job that I have, because when you boil it down, it's pretty much talking to people and getting things done, which is relevant to all walks of life and any discipline at all. So what I've tried to do with this talk is break it down into some practical tips that hopefully you can take away with you. So you can also be more producer. Okay, so first question, what does a producer do? So I get this question a lot. I tend to do a lot of like mentoring. I tend to do a lot of like industry outreach stuff. And it's really hard to know what producers do, especially from outside of game dev. So one of the best questions I get that addresses this is, what is your day-to-day like? So I've tried to break it down into segments, sort of talking about what a day-to-day is like. So let's have a quick. Assessing risks. So we tend to get together as a team and we assess the roadmap with the other producers on the Sea of Thieves team. We also do this with art teams. We do this with all kinds of different content teams that we have needs from, and we have to assess priorities. So we're doing these meetings to do things like, is there any new information? Do we need to change plans? Is everything running on time? Is anything at risk? Do we need to redeploy resources? Running team meetings. So examples of these are stand-ups. I work with the Pirate Emporium team where we have stand-ups twice a week, where we get together, we see what stage our work is at, we see if anybody needs help, do collaborative problem solving and like seeing what needs to happen as a team to support each other. Check in on each other, and we also share performance results, and I've got a little bit at the end about why we do that later. So we also do a similar format for feature reviews. So feature reviews tend to be a bit more zoomed out. We'll normally have someone sharing a build with the work that we're looking at, go through work statuses, see if there's anything that needs to happen, schedule up the work, and also just get the team together to collaboratively problem solve, look at their work together and go, you know what, this is going well, we're making some cool stuff together. So requesting new work. Requesting new work can be for things that are dependencies for delivery. So for example, I always need to request text and marketing to be able to market the Pirate Emporium. So it's going to those teams and asking for that work. Or sometimes this is kicking off new work in the pipeline, so going to the art team and saying, here's what we want to release, here's the roadmap that we want to have. So forming a roadmap. And the last one is quite broad, but it's having answers. So getting people information to unblock their work, make sure they can go and get things done, being the keeper of spreadsheets and sources of truth. I always have way too many spreadsheets open all the time, sometimes to the point where it crashes my machine. And just being able to point people to the right people they need to be able to help them, or getting them unblocked, getting them going. So I chose this image as the background of this slide with the wheel because I kind of think of producers as like the hub of a wheel, the axle of a wheel. So we hold a lot of information in the middle and feed it out along the spokes so that everyone on the outside can keep moving as fast as possible and as smoothly as possible. And also a little bit because from the outside it sometimes doesn't look like we're doing very much. But a good producer often doesn't look like they're doing very much because stuff just happens. It just happens, it just works. So we essentially manage people, resources, time, and emotions. The last one might sound a bit surprising, but I don't think I could find you a producer out there who hasn't had to be a therapist for someone, and emotionally supporting the team and helping them feel like safe to come to you with problems is a really, really important part of the job. But I have more on that later. So a really great breakdown I saw about this somewhere online was if you've ever had to organize a group holiday for at least 6 people, you can be a producer, and that's completely correct. So if you've ever had to do that, you could be a producer. So this is my first section. I've broken it down into planning and delivery. So the idea with this section is I'm going to crack on with some areas where everybody can either go back to the basics or get some helpful tips. So planning and delivery, how we can create clarity for as many people as possible. So understand the negatives of every plan. This slide is intentionally left with Scary Megalodon. So for every plan that you come up with, list out the negatives. So you might think, if we're going to go and do it anyway, what's the point? What benefit does that get us? But the thing is that if you don't list them out, your brain will invent them, and it will be like a huge underwater horror, unknown, infinite, and terrifying. Your brain will try to escape the horror by coming up with a new plan, a perfect plan that doesn't have all of these unknown negatives. And you'll just get stuck in this loop. You'll get stuck going, we need a new plan, we need a better plan, one that will be perfect. And that doesn't exist. So what happens is if you actually list all the negatives down of your plan, you'll understand and expect the bad parts. And you're assessing the risk correctly. So this also helps when you come to assessment after you've shipped the thing. If it was supposed to be only positives, it's not realistic and the team is going to feel like they've failed. It can also help you to confront the worst thing that can actually happen, and how realistic that is by looking at it. Quite often, the negatives of a plan are just like the other side of a coin. It's a route that you chose not to take. So by listing them out, it's really helpful for everybody. So the next bit I've got is about meetings. Everybody loves meetings. So people often dread meetings, but the reason people often dread meetings is because they're not being done properly. If you're just doing them to have a meeting, it's not good. You shouldn't be doing that. So these are really basic things, but this was helpful for me to go back to. So agenda. Every meeting you have should have a clear purpose or a problem you're trying to solve. There should be a world before you have the meeting and a world after you have the meeting, and those should be very different. You should understand something or have an answer that you didn't have before you had this meeting. So an example thing that you could need a meeting about is something's gone horribly wrong. What are we going to do? We have a vague brief, but we need to turn it into a more solid brief that we can actually go and action by pinning things down. Is everything going okay with our work? Just like a check-in. That's still a valid reason to have a meeting. So make sure you include the agenda in your invite. Tell people why you're having this meeting. It also gives you a really good stick to beat people with if you go off topic, which does happen. Next one, notes. Take notes. You just had a really great meeting. You've solved loads of things. Everyone agrees this is great, we're all aligned, we're going to go do this. So you all split off, you go do your thing, but it's a few weeks later and things have gone a bit off the rails. Someone's interpretation of what you agreed is different to someone else's interpretation of what you agreed. Someone else is going, this is not what I understood from what we all got together and said. You've been to sleep since then, you can't quite remember what happened. So what would have helped here? Notes. Notes would have helped. I've saved my own butt many times by having comprehensive notes that I have forgotten, oh yeah, we did make a good decision about this and here's why. Another thing, as a follow-on to your notes, is to have action points. So action points, I chose this image as the background of my slide because action points are quite literally a list of what's going to happen and what needs to happen. So it's really important as well that you put specific people on the hook for doing things on your action points. So this is really important. This can feel quite awkward, especially if you're quite early in your career or if the people you are putting on point for something are senior to you, are very experienced to you. But it's really important. It's very important for everybody to have clear expectations on who is going to go away and do this work and who is going to come back in how much time with the delivery. It's especially relevant if there's a meeting where several people could feasibly go off and do that work and come back. So having clear action points and like clarifying who's going to do the thing. Oh, I've skipped ahead. Ironic. So, what's next? What is happening next? Do you need another meeting? Are we just going to ship the thing? Are we just like deploying it? Are we coming back once the thing is shipped to look at results together? Tell everybody what's coming up. Tell everybody how we close the loop on this and how we understand whether it was successful or not. So, running meetings is a skill. It's a skill that not many people necessarily think about. To be really good at it, you have to be able to keep the agenda in your head. You have to be able to keep track of what people are saying, take notes, or you can record the meeting to get the notes instead, and also to be able to direct and steer the conversation. So to be able to track where things are going, what people are talking about, are we staying on track? Also, what's really important is to be as inclusive as possible. So if there are people on your team who are more quiet, to make sure that their voices are being heard and that they're being included in the conversation. So, this is probably my favorite saying ever, and I say it all the time. So it's have a plan to change the plan. So I like this because it's got two meanings at once. So the first meaning is that you need an actual plan to start with in order to be able to then change the plan. I love having a plan. The plan will almost never shake out exactly as you envision it in the first place, but that's fine. That's actually the point of what you're doing. It's included in the plan because that's the second meaning, is you have a plan. You're planning to change the plan. And this might seem strange. You might think, why on earth would I want to do this? This sounds very stressful. But the thing is that this is in reaction to all kinds of things. Things in video games never work the way they are originally supposed to work. Things always go wrong. You could have somebody be off sick, you could have a huge part of your engine just stops working and nobody knows why. There are all kinds of things that could cause delays. So we have to have a plan to change a plan. So I'm talking specifically about live service. So for live service, you want to have things that can change and things that can't change. So typically, things that can change can be things like delivery dates. So when exactly are we going to ship this chunk of content? So recently for Sea of Thieves, our last season that we delivered, the delivery date ended up changing on when we were shipping that content. So we had to have a plan to know which bits needed to go and shift with the season date changing and which bits were going to be delivered at their original planned dates. And that was a whole load of work that we had to go do, but we could do it easily and pivot to do it because we had a plan to change the plan should we need to. So, for the Pirate Emporium, the purpose of things shouldn't change, ideally, for what we're doing. One of the things that can't change. So, content in the Pirate Emporium is for a specific purpose. It's for selling to our players. It's also as an experiment to see if there is a particular target audience for a certain type of content. But the fundamental purpose of it shouldn't be changing. That's one of the things that can't change. And one of the things, going back to what can change, is what else is shipped along with the thing. So in the season date, we had bits that could move, that were tied to the season, bits that couldn't move, which were tied to calendar dates. So delivery dates I've put down as they can change sometimes because occasionally you'll have content that has to hit a certain point in your delivery for it to make any sense. If you have content that is themed for Christmas and it overshoots Christmas, it's useless to you and it can't fulfill its purpose. So those kind of things you want to have on the roadmap as early as possible. You want to devote resources to those kind of things, and everything else you should have being flexible and moving around it as far as possible. So, commit early. Does this not contradict what I just said about having a plan to change the plan? I would argue no. This is the bit where you lock in the plan in the first place. So most human beings like to wait as late as possible before they lock something in or commit to something. And this is because we have a fear in the back of our minds that if we wait longer, we'll have more information and we'll be more informed to make the decision. But that's not, most of the time, that's not always the case. So you want to get people to commit as early as possible so that everyone can go and do their work as early as possible and you can find the issues that inevitably will emerge with video games. So, hang on. So, I used to have this issue quite a lot in a previous job I was in, where we would have event designers who would design events for specific holidays or occasions in the year, and they would wait as late as possible, and I'd be badgering them, going, nothing fundamental about Valentine's Day is going to change in the 2 weeks between you locking in this brief now and giving it to me, and the 2 weeks when I'm actually going to get it and the team are going to be late and behind. So a way to approach this, a way to get a solution as early as possible, is to get the people that you need to commit to something in a room and to get them to list out what their uncertainties are or what they would want to know to be able to commit to the plan. So a lot of the time, people will realize through going through this exercise that they already know everything they actually need to know and they can just lock it in now so everyone can go off and do their work. But if there is something that comes out that goes, okay, we need data about, does this particular player group like this kind of activity? Is this the right time of year for us to do this, or could we deploy it some other time? If there's something that you can go and find out that would actually inform this plan, go and try and do that, go and make it happen. And if you can't do that, you just have to commit anyway and just do it. Because my other favorite saying is don't break the pipe. So the general live service loop I would define this way. So we have a hypothesis. We're doing science all the time. We have a hypothesis. We think this content is going to do this particular thing. We think this player type is going to like it. We think it's going to sell this much. We have a hypothesis. We then go into the production phase. So the production phase for Sea of Thieves is about 4 months' time. So while something is in the production phase, you should absolutely not be changing the purpose of the content. If the reason you've put it in there is because we think, oh, hey, if we do like a skeleton Santa Claus outfit, we think that will sell around Christmas. You should not be going back to the brief in the beginning and going, actually, we've changed our minds. We want to do, I don't know, I'm trying to think of something different, like an ice giant Santa Claus instead. So the rest of the cycle is you then have the release, so the content goes out there to the wild, to the players, and then we get results, we get data about how that performed, so we can then assess it against our hypothesis, was that actually right? If you get results and you have things that you've learned that apply to things that are in production, my method is never change it. Even if you go, oh my gosh, it turns out that our players don't buy red things at all, and we've got a red thing in production, don't change it, because you can double check, you can run the experiment again, you can find out if that is the case, you can learn more things, but if you alter it while it is in production, you will break the pipe. Nothing should be disrupted just because we've learned something. And I have a few bits on the pipe in a minute. So, another aspect to not breaking the pipe is things go through stages of assessment, feedback, and refinement. The idea is with content is you should start with a wide funnel. So in this case, we're going to make a Skeleton Lord costume for Christmas for Sea of Thieves. As we go through the process of making the item, it should narrow in scope. We should be more sure what we're doing, and we should have less feedback that goes back to a fundamental earlier stage in development. So in this case, we've decided what it's going to look like. We've got a concept art. We know what's happening here. People can give feedback on like the detail refinement, but we can't go back to the fundamental premise of what we're doing. And then when it comes back in 3D, at this point you should be making refinements and feedback on the 3D aspects. You should not be going back and going, actually I don't like the horns, can we take those off? Because you locked that in earlier with the concept art. You should be refining it down and locking in your plan. You shouldn't be going back up, because that's wasting people's time and breaking the pipe. So another thing, which is always hard for people, is good enough is good. enough, aka just ship it. Always like to get a pun in, Sea of Thieves, we like a pun. So this is always hard, especially in video games, because there will always be more that you can do. There will always be something different that you could do. But don't ever let that stand in the way of doing anything at all. And this is the job where production often have to go in and prize things out of artists' hands and go, look, it's finished, we have to ship it, it's beautiful, only you can see the flaws in this now. It's great. And the thing is that the longer people stay in this area at the end, just before shipping, where you're trying to prize things out of their hands, the more they will start to doubt it, they'll get nervous, they'll want to make changes, and this is definitely somewhere where a producer can come in and go, it's great, just give it to me, don't think about it anymore, we're just going to get it out there and it's going to be great, because the players have never seen it before and they will love it. So, next section, relationships and communication. So this sometimes gets overlooked a little bit, especially in games, I think, but this is an area where I think if everybody can put a collective effort in, it makes a much better work environment for everybody. So this is actually how I started doing the talk. So this is, the idea behind this bit is you've just started working somewhere new, or if you haven't had to work with a particular person or a particular team before. So in an ideal world, the first time, this is a belief I have, in an ideal world, the first time that you talk to someone shouldn't be when you need something from them. So if you know that you're going to be working with a particular team or a particular person, here are some leading questions, my go-to set of introductory questions to help you form a relationship with somebody. So, tell me about what you do. What do you need from me for us to be able to work together effectively? Is there anything that causes you frequent issues that can be improved? And are there any opportunities that you want to go after? So the trick is here that you have to actually then follow up, you have to do these things. So you can't just rattle off these questions and go, cool, bye, I'll be back with a random task for you in 2 weeks. If people say to you, okay, right, for me to be able to work effectively with you, I need at least 2 weeks lead time. Do your best to respect that and give that person the 2 weeks lead time. And if you can't do that for them, explain to them why, and also apologize. Go, look, I understand that you need a 2-week lead time from me, but in this instance, I can't actually do that. If you show that you care and you're listening and you're respecting people and what they need to get their job done, it will help you build a much better relationship with them. So, and that goes with all the other bits as well. So the other bits about is there anything that you want improving? Is there anything you want to go after? You might yourself not be in a position of power to be able to do something to enact any of that change, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't ask. And if you do ask and you do listen and you do care about it, what that means is when you go into meetings or if you're in future opportunities where you can help do that, you've got that person's thoughts in your head as well, so you can help include voices of the rest of the team that might not necessarily be in the room. So the cynical question might be, why? Why should I bother? Why should I do this? So the cynical answers first, retention. People who feel respected, heard, and supported will stay on your team. People who feel like they're a task machine where you just show up and go, I need this, I need it tomorrow, and just go, they won't want to stay there and they will eventually leave. Another slightly cynical reason, building credit. So if a person only has so much time and can only get so much stuff done, if you've shown them that you care about what they do, you'll probably be first at the top of the list to get support. And the last one, which is the nice one, which is the hopeful one, is culture, putting good out into the world. If you do positive things, it builds, it spirals out. It builds positivity in the team, people will start doing this for each other, and just the whole team will be happier. Basically treat people how you would like to be treated. So a little story time. So when I started working at Rare, I had a few occasions in a row where I was coming to people with problems. So I was going, I've got a bug, I've got a thing I need and it's really urgent, I've got a problem. And the person, whenever I would turn up, the person was like, oh, what have I done now? And I started picking up on this, and so I started bringing them cake, because I wanted to have an excuse to be like, hey, it's just me, I'm just here, just your friendly neighborhood producer, and I have cake. It's not always bad. So it's about establishing a relationship where the only time you see somebody isn't because something bad is happening. Okay, so building a relationship with your team. So one of the most important things you'll need to do as a producer, and to be honest, as anybody making any kind of game, any kind of collaborative creative project together, is to build a relationship with the team that you're working with. So this is my approach. It's not everybody's. It's kind of broad, but if you're interested in this is how I do it. So clear expectations. This is a thread that has been running through the presentation already. So we've covered a fair bit amount about how to run meetings, how to set action points, but being clear with what you expect from people is vital. Care personally. So I like to ask people how they're doing. I like to ask them what they got up to at the weekend. How are your pets? Anything that shows interest but is like an uncontroversial question. And then you respond, you listen, you play back, you ask them more. With any luck, people in your team will join in as well. We have this wonderful thing now in our stand-ups as a team where everyone just starts chatting. Everyone goes, show me your cat on the camera. Someone's got a new haircut. How was everybody's weekend? It's lovely. Like when you have that built, it just starts self-sustaining. It's really, really great for the team. So try and think improv. Try and think yes and. I try and do that with pretty much anybody, like anything from a team member. So if somebody makes a joke, reference it again later, build on it, add to it. Just show that you're listening, show that you recognize them as a person and value them as a person. So this isn't just a nice thing to do for the team, it also helps to ease communication between people. So if people feel like they have a pre-established working relationship or relationship of any kind, it's much easier for them to go to somebody for help or support if they're stuck with a work thing. And yeah, a strong part of building a team is about having a shared culture or language and things that only make sense to you as a team. So, next bit, trusting the experts. Your team are likely experts in their field. As a producer, sometimes this is hard because you're like, how am I going to tell these people what to do? I don't even understand half of what it is they do, especially when it comes to coders, especially when it comes to like technical, magical things. Animation is incredible. I don't understand it, but it's great. But trust them. Trust your team to do it. All you need to do is trust their judgment. If somebody tells you something isn't possible, or they need more time, or they have a particular solution for something that you didn't think would work, trust them. Either ask them to like help educate you and explain why, or just go, yeah, okay, I'm gonna just let you do it. If something isn't gonna work or isn't deliverable, the easier you find out about that, the better, because it means you can form a different plan. Another thing is that if people don't feel like they can push back, they don't feel like they can tell you bad news or things you don't want to hear, they're likely to overpromise and stress themselves out. So creating an environment where you're making it very clear that you trust them and you value the team's opinions is absolutely vital for building a strong relationship. And the last bit is provide feedback. So humans thrive on feedback, and there are 3 types everybody needs, which I will go on to. So the 3 types of feedback are appreciation, coaching, and evaluation. So appreciation is things like telling your team, good job, thank you for that, well done team. Coaching is things like, hey, I think you need to improve on this, I think you could have handled this thing differently, here's a thing that you need to work on. And evaluation is how you or your work ranks in the general hierarchy. So as a person on a team, you might not be able to provide all 3 of these, and it's not really expected that you will provide all 3 of these, but you can certainly provide the first one. Absolutely anybody at all can provide appreciation feedback, and it makes a huge amount of difference to a team's motivation and drive to do well. So in the Pirate Emporium team, we handle the evaluation feedback, not consciously, but something that I realized that we were doing was we have results of how our products are performing, and we look at these as a team at the end of stand-up. And it's something where initially I started doing it because it's something I'm really interested in. I'm really interested in, like, you know, is this animation selling more than this animation? Is this ship selling more than this ship? But it turned out that, like, all of the artists and all of the animators and all the designers, they cared about this as well, because this is evaluation of their work by the Sea of Thieves community, by the players. So everybody jokes that, like, all I do is go on about graphs, but that is the method that we're using to communicate and evaluate the team's work. So this is another thing that took me a little while to get a handle on, but don't hold back on your feedback. So if it's something that you don't think people will want to hear, that's even more reason you should say it. And another thing is that delivering bad news. Bad news is a form of feedback, so the thing about having graphs and data is there's not really anywhere to hide when you've had bad results. And I have had to tell my team at times, like, look, this month we didn't hit our targets. And that is a really, really hard thing to do as a leader of a team, but it's really important for your team to be able to support them through the bad news or the bad results, and to show them that it can't just all be good all the time, or that's not realistic. We're going to have bad results, but it's then not staying in the pit of despair. It's going, what are we going to do differently? How are we going to learn from this? How are we going to tackle the next challenge with the knowledge that we've gained from this failure? So this is maybe a bit of a broad one, but everyone's different. So this might seem really, really obvious, but I've learned a few hard lessons in this area. So introverts versus extroverts. Some people will like to do things very differently. So an example of ways that introverted people might like to have information is before a meeting, they might like a pre-read, they might want time to organize their thoughts and think about what they're going to say, whereas the more extroverted people might want to just come to the meeting, just bounce off each other, and just see what comes out. It's important to try and accommodate all different styles. So introverts also, I am an introvert, I struggle in meetings sometimes. There's a lot going on, there's a lot of people talking, I'm trying to listen, but also I have a time delay on how I can think about an answer. So something that might get bounced around in a meeting as an idea, as a thing, I might have input on that, but I might have input on that 4 hours after the meeting is finished. So it's about creating different avenues for how people can input and give feedback and give their thoughts. So we're trying a few different things out where we have both meetings, but we also have, like, chats open or email threads, different ways to discuss the same things and get the benefits of the way everybody thinks differently. Okay. So, we'll skip over this. Emotional support. So, I'm going to dive in a bit deep about providing emotional support after I've had a drink of water. So, remember the bit earlier when I said that producers are therapists? I basically want everyone to start being able to be each other's therapists. So I want everybody in the games industry to be able to be supporting their colleagues in this area. So, when something goes wrong, or we feel upset or hurt by a decision, we'll feel strong emotion about it. And this is normal, but what people need initially is a way to process the emotion, a safe way to, like, get it out, to vent, start processing it. You've got to let it out before you can move on. And this is where it can be helpful to have somebody listen to you. You can do it yourself, you can, like, you know, go off, you can scream, you can punch a pillow, you can let it out, but having another person can be helpful. So the problem that we often get with a lot of people is when we go to them, we go to complain, we go to vent, and their first instinct is to fix the problem that the person is complaining about, right? Because that's what you want the problem fixed. And then all of this will go away. But that's not the case, not necessarily. So a lot of the time, people just want to be heard, people want to be validated, people want someone there with them in the space going, yeah, that did suck. Yeah, that is a hard decision for you. So, a question that can help you with this is, do you want me to listen, or do you want some advice? And often, if someone is complaining to you about something, or someone is venting about something, just asking this question helps to frame the conversation for both you and the person that you're listening to. Sometimes, when people have got it all out of their system, they will genuinely want some advice, but what is really disruptive and frustrating for people is when they're in the middle of the bit where they're just letting it out. They're just going, I'm so angry, I can't believe they cancelled my project. And you're going, well, have you talked to so-and-so? Have you asked why? Have you done blah, blah, blah? They're like, no, I just need to get it out. Like, you might, once you've vented it out, probably logically you'll understand why they cancelled your project. You don't have time, you don't have budget, etc. But just someone being in the space and hearing you and going, yeah, that's valid. I understand why you're mad that they cancelled that project. Can really, really help. So I want everybody to be able to do this for each other. So, this is pretty much the end. This is all I had to say. I was ending on emotional support because I think it's so important. But if anybody wants some resources, a lot of what I've talked about just now is drawn from both my own experience, but also these are some really, really great books for if you've got any kind of work around production, around leading teams, around just working with different people who work different ways. So thanks for the feedback is really, really great for being open to the way other people think about things and not getting defensive when someone basically thinks a different way to you. Quiet, which is kind of hard for you to see, is basically about both introverts and extroverts and how they function differently and how things are set up differently to work for different people. The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team is a really, really great book about building a team that trusts each other, that can be open with how they approach things differently. And Radical Candor is basically about caring about people and then being very direct and upfront with your feedback to those people because it's a form of caring. If you're depriving people of solid direction and feedback, you are doing them a disservice. So those, I would recommend all of those. So, we've got to the end. Do we have any questions? I don't know. Oh, sorry, hang on.
Right, I mean, obviously amazing. Thanks so much. But anybody got any question? Yes, somebody at the back. But yeah, keep throwing your hands up. But this guy got there first.
Hiya, yeah, thanks for the talk.
Yeah, no worries.
It's really good, really enjoyed it, especially the stuff on, I'm a producer myself and 100% agree on the stuff about emotional support and relationship management and stuff. What I wanted to ask is sort of 2 questions, if that's okay. So one's just about how you prioritize both for yourself and managing your own time. Can you hear me okay? Yeah? Yeah, so it's kind of 2 questions, if that's all right. So it's firstly, how do you prioritize and manage both your own time and prioritize for the team, and any sort of like software or techniques you use, and also how if you need to spend time focusing on a piece of work that might take you a few hours or something, how do you handle kind of dealing with messages and emails coming in, distractions and stuff like that?
That's good questions. So for prioritizing team's work, what I tend to do first of all is look at, is this work going to block anybody else? So for example, if you have an animator and they can't start their work until they've got the character mesh done, you go and talk to the character artist and go, okay, this is a blocker for somebody else. It's like stopping things from moving further down the pipeline. So can we prioritize this? Can we get this to the top of the queue? So that would tend to be, ideally, the way I would prioritize things. Other than that, it would be in date order. So when do we need to ship this thing? What order are we shipping things in, and do it that way? The other way I would prioritize is what is the biggest unknown. So what work do we need to start where we have no idea, we've never done this before, it's a big experiment, we don't know what could go wrong, we want to do that as early as possible so that you find out what is going to break, because something will break, it will never work first time, so having as much time as possible for that to go wrong. Does that answer that first question? Yeah, cool, okay, so the second question was it was software, wasn't it? So at Rare, we use Azure DevOps or ADO, but Jira is very common, Trello, Favro, they're all kind of fundamentally the same in terms of like they're all doing a very similar thing, you manage them all in a similar way, you need a similar mindset to know them, so whatever tracking or planning software you're using is fine if it works for you. If you do join a studio, they will onboard you and tell you the specific ways that you need to be managing things. So as long as you've got a base level understanding, it will transfer over, it will be fine and people will expect that. The last one about having time for focus work, this is always a challenge. I do try to block out chunks in my calendar and set myself to do not disturb, especially like if I have to do a presentation, it'll be like, right, I don't want anything pinging, I don't want any of this. It's tough because it's hard not to get distracted by, like, oh, I can help here, I can help here, I can do this, I can do that. But I think it does help if you go, look, if something's going to be on fire because I haven't answered in an hour, we've got a problem anyway, really. So, yeah, just trying to block off chunks in my calendar and going, I am going to spend this hour writing this document and I'm going to do my best to ignore all the pop-ups. And I think if you can also have multiple people that people can go to, that's not always a luxury that you have, but if people can't find you, they'll go start asking somewhere else if it's really important, or they'll call you.
Great, any more? We've definitely got time for a couple more. Brilliant, I'll do you first and then move it down.
Hello. Hello? Don't know if is it working? Oh, there you go. Awesome. Hello. Thank you again so much for the talk. It was so helpful. So I'm a newbie to the industry. I'm a new producer. I'm still an intern at the minute. So my question really is like, how do you set up that? How do you establish that relationship with your team being new to the industry? So pretty much, if you were going to talk to your like first self coming into the industry, what would you give them? What's the advice you'd give?
That's very good. I think if you're building a relationship with a new team, one of the things that I learned that like I try to apply when I'm in interviews is people love talking about themselves and people love being asked about themselves. So that's why one of the first questions on the how to build a relationship is like, tell me about what you do. Because if you basically just go and show interest, go, who are you? What are you about? That's normally a pretty good stepping stone to building a new relationship. I think it would depend on if it's a pre-existing team, if it's a team that's just formed. If it's a pre-existing team, one of the good ways to kind of learn from them and sort of ingratiate yourself with them is to go, let's all have a big complaint. Let's all have a moan about all the things we hate about what we have to do currently, all the things that aren't working, all the things that are frustrating, causing friction. We had a retrospective for our team just this week, and it can be hard to do sometimes because you're sitting there with people's criticisms coming at you. But if you're new and none of this is your problem, you didn't create this, you can just be like a holding area for all of their complaints and woes. And if you go, cool, I've heard you, that's half of what they want. If you can also go, I will try my best to do something about it, that is going to win you big points. So that would be my advice there.
Similar question, so you've already preempted that one. We've technically got 2 minutes left. I'm sure we can run over one or two and I won't get told off too much. Has anybody got one last question? Am I missing a hand? As in seeing a hand? Yes, brilliant.
Hi, thanks again for the talk. It's been wonderful. I imagine that with all the techniques that you've talked about, that most people are also aware of these techniques, which means that it sometimes can be kind of difficult to come across as trustworthy. It can sometimes be quite difficult to come across as trustworthy because there's a lot of techniques you're applying and people feel like it's not genuine. How do you deal with that?
Okay, so from my understanding, your question is how do you come across as being trustworthy and build trust quickly? So I think the thing to do is to not wait for it to happen. Just start behaving as if you already have the team's trust. Start behaving as if I'm going to go and raise this issue because it's an issue that I think is going to affect the team. I'm going to go make these decisions. I'm going to just come in and start behaving as if we've been working together for years. Behave as if you trust them implicitly, and it will just sort of start to happen. It sounds like a bit of a weird one, but it's kind of, yeah, just start doing it and it will build. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. Thank you.
Cool.
Nice one. Well, we better call that it, but Louise, thank you so much. Let's give her the
Thanks,
applause she
everyone.
deserves.